In this video, what I thought we'd do is take a look at the difference between opacity and flow when it comes to brushes in Adobe Photoshop. So we're back in Adobe Photoshop here on my design class. And like I said, what we're going to do is take a look at the difference between opacity and flow. So obviously when we start in Adobe Photoshop and we find the brush tool, which is on the left-hand toolbar, by the way, if you don't know, and the shortcut to it is B. So that's B for both Windows and Mac. So what you might do is start off by just trying out the brush tool, maybe just draw some lines, and then you might start to play around with some of the other settings. So for example, maybe decrease the opacity, might just decrease the brush size quickly too, so we have some space. As you can see, that kind of affects the transparency of our brush. And then you might also try it with flow. So if I just set the opacity back up to 100%, perhaps decrease the flow to 1%. As you can see, it's very easy to mistake the flow with opacity because as you can see on the left here, it's also slightly transparent. So what actually is the difference between flow and opacity? Well, the easiest way to describe this, if I just quickly get rid of all of this by pressing Command and Z on my keyboard or Ctrl and Z for Windows. When we change the opacity of a brush, so for example, let me set this to, let's say 30%. If you're wondering how I'm changing the opacity by using the word, if you just hold your left mouse key over the word itself and drag to the right, it will increase the opacity, drag it to the left, and it will actually decrease the opacity. You can obviously also just input a value if you want. So I'm just going to quickly make sure that's selected. So when we start to draw something in Adobe Photoshop with a lower opacity, as you can see, it's slightly transparent. So we can see through the layer itself. And as you can see, when we draw over this selection again, it's actually going to add to the areas where we've already drawn on before. So as you can see, in these areas where we've actually drawn over what we had before, they're slightly less transparent. So we keep building up every time we actually draw over those same areas until eventually it's almost pure that color that we have selected as our foreground color. Now, the crucial thing to notice when we're drawing with opacity, if I just quickly delete this layer and make a new one so we have a bit more space. As you can see, when I start drawing with a lower opacity and I actually cross over the areas that I've already drawn over, we don't add anything initially. So it's only when I actually let go of my left mouse button and start to draw again that it actually adds to that area. And this is one of the key differences between opacity and flow. So obviously when we're drawing in real life with a real piece of paper and a real pencil, when we apply pressure with the pencil and actually cross over the areas that we've already drawn at before, it's actually going to add to the drawing that we've already made. And this is essentially what flow is trying to mimic. So if I just quickly undo this and increase the opacity and decrease the flow once again, what you'll notice is two things. First of all, when I start drawing and actually cross over the area that I've already drawn, we automatically add to that drawing that we've already made, which kind of mimics the effect that we have on paper when we cross two lines. But furthermore, when we actually create a curve or a sharp corner using flow, as you can see, it's automatically also going to add. And if I just quickly make another drawing, as you can see, this area in the middle here of where we started our curve, I'll just quickly zoom in and then move to the right using the hand tool, for which the shortcut is H, by the way. As you can see, when we've moved our brush in this curved shape, this area has obviously been in contact with the brush much longer than on the outside here, where the movement is slightly more exaggerated. So obviously that crossover is also going to add some extra ink here. And that's basically what flow is trying to mimic. It's how it's actually adding to the initial drawing that we've already made. Whereas with opacity, it's not going to actually add to, it's literally just going to affect the opacity of the things you are drawing. So once again, if I quickly bring up opacity, decrease that and increase the flow, maybe not that drastically. As you can see, when we're drawing, we're not actually adding to anything and we're literally just affecting the transparency of the paint that we're applying. So hopefully that actually clears up the difference between opacity and flow in Adobe Photoshop when it comes to brushes. Hopefully you can now decide which one is more practical and applicable to your project. If you're interested in learning how you can actually draw shapes using the pen tool in Adobe Photoshop, then do check out the video in the top right hand corner of the end screen. And otherwise, do remember to leave a like on the video if you're enjoying the content and also subscribe to the channel to make sure you never miss a new Photoshop tutorial.